Great to see how active the various funds and entities are in investment across various sectors of late in the region. And following that theme, we're now going to look at the hot global trends for tech investors to see what decisions go involved in those type of investments. What's hype and what's not, and how the year ahead is looking in terms of investment. So moderating this panel, welcome to the stage, Fawzi Rahal, Managing Director of Flat 6 Labs Beirut.
Good morning, everyone. Could I please invite my panelists, Jonathan Nelson, Massimo Cambello, and Rami Al-Karmi to the stage, please? Wow, it's a really nice attendance this morning. Hello. So for my audience, we have Rami, Massimo, and Jonathan. Not in the order that's above.
Exactly in the same order. It's okay.
So following on from the opening panel, from the opening talk, and obviously from the introduction of the MC, our opening panel today discusses what's hot in tech, what are the trends that are out there, and what are the things to look out for or to watch out for as well. Before we begin, I think it's very important for each one of our panelists to take a few minutes to describe what they do and what they've been up to, because they've been up to a lot. We had a bit of an hour and a half of a pre-panel meeting, so we're going to try to pack this up into 40 minutes. And I'm going to start with you, Rami. Rami, you're the Chief Investment Officer, Chief Innovation Officer at Ahli Bank, and also the CEO of Ahli Fintech.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what does it mean for a bank to have a fintech arm, and what have you been doing lately?
All right. First of all, we're still trying to discover what does that mean. So I think at this stage we're the only bank maybe in the region that owns a fintech company, and we're trying to have a hybrid model that revolves around this fintech company being both an investor, a venture builder, and the innovation accelerator within the bank. Our mandate is a bit wide, and we're trying, as we speak, to figure out what do we focus on at the early stage. But we have in terms of seeding IP, we have a global perspective. So we're looking at the whole spectrum from a global perspective on what's out there in terms of fintech. But it's a spillover effect that we're trying to do in terms of accelerating the fintech ecosystem and investing in this space.
Excellent. I'm going to get back to you in a bit about asking about regulations and things that relate to this part of the world. Massimo.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm the business partner for the Middle East for Supernova Labs.
Closer, please, to the microphone.
Can you hear me? Yes. Supernova Labs is an Italian accelerator now active in Italy and most of Europe and some few months also here in the Middle East, which basically is an advisory consulting company that has in its portfolio over 40.
Wow, you're getting the effect.
40.
That's a lot of 40s.
startups or companies active in the banking and insurance business. So what we do is we help the banks to move forward in the digital transformation road by picking, the most suitable fintechs for their specific needs, and to partner with both of them in making sure that the implementation of the solution within the bank systems is effective in a rather short period of time.
Excellent. Jonathan.
Hello.
Hello. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over the past couple of years? I know, we spoke about so many things, but let's focus it down to your current role and what you do before we kind of digress.
I'm a strange man, and I have done a lot of things in my prior lives. I'm currently the CEO and founder of Hackers and Founders. We do a lot of startup events, nerds building startups. We've held them in 120 cities around the globe. About 300,000 people have attended our events. After having conversations with thousands of entrepreneurs, we decided to start solving some of their problems. So we help companies from around the world have soft landings in Silicon Valley. We've done that for 5 years. Those companies have gone, our 55 company portfolio has gone from about 0 to being worth about $600 million. In 5 years, they've raised $100 million in aggregate. We've had 7 exits from our portfolio. Our next thing is we are using blockchain to solve what I believe are some of the biggest problems of raising investment in emerging markets. So Hack Fund is a liquid blockchain-based fund where people can buy our stock and sell our stock on crypto exchanges, and the money that we raise from that gets invested into startups.
Show of hands, how many actually got an idea of what he just talked about? Elaborate.
I geek out a little bit, sorry.
You need to elaborate a little bit.
So basically, when companies raise money from an investor will buy stock in their company. That investor only makes a profit when my company gets sold to Google or has an IPO. So unless I can sell my company or IPO my company, my investors do not make money. Their money is frozen inside of my company. That's what's known as the liquidity problem. And another, how many companies in Lebanon have been acquired by Google in the last 10 years? In the MENA region? Probably 0. And that's one of the reasons that there's not a whole lot of investment into this region, is because the companies don't get liquid, they don't get exited, they don't IPO, they don't get acquired. So we are building a new type of fund where my investors in my fund do not have to wait for my companies to exit. They can simply buy my stock, and if they want to make money and my stock price goes up, they can sell my stock. So we're trying to change the way how venture capital is doing, specifically to focus on the problems of startups in emerging markets. Was that better?
Is that better? Show of hands?
Phew, thank you.
Yes, much better. Okay, so based on our pre-panel, I think we have a lot of keywords we want to talk about. Crypto, ICO, and blockchain. I don't think you can mention one without talking about the other two. Artificial intelligence. You guys spoke about chatbots. And I'm going to stop there just to see if we can cover these in the 40 minutes that we have, and then we'll see what else we can talk about. I want to start with the trilogy of the crypto, blockchain, ICO. With you, Jonathan. ICOs are yet to be regulated in this part of the world. We know that Ripple and a couple others have kicked off now, and they're actually pretty impressive. If we were to look at the pros and cons of ICOing in a nutshell at first, right? When would it make sense for a company to ICO, and what are the impacts of doing so? Let's start with that.
So for me, the biggest benefit to this blockchain technology is that for the first time in history, I can sell you a digital item and you get to own it. Like the blockchain proves, it's a giant receipt that lives in the cloud. And every time if I sell you something, you own it, that goes on the receipt. So when companies ICO, they're essentially creating a digital product that anyone in the world can buy, and we can prove that they own it. In my mind, most of these ICOs, and in the SEC's mind, 99.9% of these ICOs, what you're selling is a security. It's a stock or a loan. It's a security that should be regulated. The advantage of these is I can essentially sell my stock to anyone in the world with an internet connection. Which means that I don't necessarily, I can sell to investors from China, I can sell to investors from Saudi Arabia, I can sell to my neighbor. And it's an online shopping cart that people can use to buy and sell my stock. That's the upside. The downside is that there's a lot of jerks in the world. And a lot of people are taking advantage of this. Just last week I received an email from someone offering me to make me 10% a day if I only bought his Bitcoin or his version of, whatever. And so there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of cheating, there's a lot of lying in this industry. But for me, the most exciting thing about these ICOs, these initial offerings of these digital products, is that anywhere in the world can buy them and anyone in the world can sell them online. So it kind of becomes the internet of stock or the internet of money kind of stuff. That for me is very exciting.
Are we
It's a
coining
huge
a new
innovation.
term? Is that an attempt to coin a new term?
Sure.
I want to jump to you, Rami, and still remaining within the context of ICOs and cryptocurrencies. You're pretty senior at a bank, and you're very familiar with the regulations that go around it. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the concerns from the governmental entities about why ICOs are bad, why crypto is not, obviously beyond the fact that it disrupts regulation, the obvious. Why is there a lot of hesitation and paranoia from ICOs and from cryptocurrency use?
Okay. Well, for starters, I can't speak on behalf of any.
No, on behalf of you as someone who's
sure
the CEO of a fintech division at a bank.
But I think I feel we're blessed at this time. Now all regulators across the region, specifically in Jordan, we're going through a phase where there's high adoption of new technologies and there's interest and openness towards exploring them. Just the fact of being, as we speak, we work directly with the regulator on most of the opportunities that we look at, just to make sure that we don't go in depth into any discussion with any fintech and then being stopped for any understanding versus. But the way I see it is that regulators, of course, have a point because their mandate includes making sure there's some control mechanism that takes care of the direct consumer or the constituents. Now, as Johnson just mentioned, there's lots of jerks out there. And ICO, especially as it stands with no regulation, with no model behind it and what have you, introduces lots of fraud and the option of any regular citizen just going through this fraud case without anyone introducing those controls in place. I think it has to go through this maturity cycle for regulators to be able not to simply stop this, but properly understand it and introduce proper control mechanisms within it. I know SEC, for example, is looking into that in different regions and what have you, because if you go back in time when SEC was introduced and what have you, there has been lots of fraud, and then this regulation came in to regulate this model and make sure that it takes care of you as a consumer if you go through any fraud. And so once ICOs came in, I guess there was some barrier that some people started slipping in.
The jerks, again.
Exactly. So we still need that layer. And I'm pro having a regulator in place, a regulation in place, and not necessarily a regulator that looks at it, but at least a regulation in place. How does that look like? How do you maintain regulation and control while not hindering innovation and growth?
I don't think anyone's figured that out yet.
That's the billion-dollar question.
Basically. Yeah. Massimo, you work with 40 companies, you provide them consultancies, and you practically work with nobody other than banks on the other side.
Yes.
Your area of expertise is in Europe, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about what are the feelings towards crypto and ICOing in Europe.
Well, actually, on our side, the kind of fintech that we're working with are more on the core business, of course, of the banks. But clearly, there's a lot of interest in.
But I'm
the
sure
banking
every meeting
systems
starts with
about,
that conversation,
about
right?
crypto and ICOs. I think that most of the banks are at the moment in Italy and other major European countries mostly interested in the blockchain technology as technology, in the sense that the technology can be quite a backbone to transform certain processes that could be either less efficient or, not exactly so fast. So basically, blockchain could reduce certain operating costs and improve the speed of delivering, services to the different customer segments. So I think most of the interest is exactly in that side. For the ICOs and the cryptocurrencies, I think is still on a way where basically these are, very much regulated by the European Central Bank. So the European Central Bank is looking at that in a quite, careful way. Mr. Draghi recently, just a month ago, had quite a very strong pronouncement and, declaration that these coins can be quite harmful. So that is the kind of attitude that regulators have at the moment in Europe, probably less advanced than SEC's that is probably a few steps forward. But I think they are very much concerned about the possible risks for the mass market at the moment. So that is, I think, the current situation.
Okay, in the context of risk, I want to ask you, Jonathan, again. First of all, he said cryptocurrency, and I know when he said currency, you kind of like twitch with that. You have a bit of an allergy to calling cryptocurrency cryptocurrency.
Anytime, what is a currency? It's a thing that's generally created by a government to create commerce, and then the government's job is to tax that. Anytime that you call something a currency, governments are going to get very crabby. I like to call these things digital assets or crypto assets because many of them aren't trying to be money. Many of them are trying to be different financial products. ETHLend is essentially a platform for businesses to lend to each other. Stellar is a platform to let banks be able to make transactions faster between each other. Hack, what we're doing is essentially building a type of mini ETF or mini mutual fund for startup investing. Other friends of mine are building ways to turn commercial real estate buildings and break ownership of a commercial real estate building into 1,000 little parts so that someone could buy $500 worth of a massive, industrial building or something like that. And so I think calling them currencies distracts from all the innovation that happens and that is happening in this space, which is why I like to make them just more boring sounding assets. But which is exciting to me is the innovations that this is going to bring in the next 10 to 20 years.
Okay, and just the last question I have for my panelists again, before we switch to another topic, is we can talk about cryptocurrency for 2 panels, I guess, is, there's a huge hype about Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and the list goes on. It's very common to hear people arguing of, no, don't buy this one, buy that one. This one is going to be on the rise. This is the next hot thing. Is any of them the next hot thing? If I were to invest in Bitcoin, or in crypto assets, crypto something, is it smart for me to just pick 1 or 2 and dump my money there? Do you have any advice? Is there a proper way? Is there a modus operandi of how is the best way for me to invest in crypto in general?
So what I would suggest is think of it as one type of asset in a diverse portfolio. You wouldn't put all of your money into Cisco stock. You wouldn't necessarily put all of your money into Google stock. You wouldn't necessarily put all of your money into one hotel that you're building on a beach. The idea is diversify and invest in real estate, invest in stocks, invest in bonds. And if you have 1% of your net worth, where if you lose it, you lose it. But if you invest 1% of your net worth and it happens to go up 100x in the next 5 years, maybe I can buy an island. So don't invest more than you can actually lose. And then don't just buy one cryptocurrency, diversify into 20 or 30. And that will actually make you learn about these technologies. And I believe that these technologies are going to be the future of finance in 10 or 20 years. So just in terms of learning, I think it's a fantastic education for people.
Anybody else would like to add something before we move on to?
And I personally feel the current cryptocurrencies out there are still not the real hot thing coming out. It's yet to be discovered. Something is in the making, and we'll see it coming soon.
So do you believe that none of the ones that are here today are worth investing in?
Investment is another issue.
Okay.
On the investment side, I truly believe there's a bubble out there, and lots of people make money out of bubbles. But you need to maintain clear insight that this is a bubble. So you either make it or break it.
Very well said.
And human greed across Ponzi's, across site, shows that people just jump all over bubbles. Just make sure you understand that it's a bubble out there.
Thanks for that. Okay. Artificial intelligence and bots. I know all three of you work in that. Does anyone want to talk to us about what are the latest things they've been seeing in terms of behaviors, what are being used in fintech and with banks, with hardware?
Well, I can talk a little bit, for instance, about the robo-advisory technology and platforms that are picking up significantly now in Europe. So artificial intelligence can be quite
Are
useful.
we talking about drones?
In
No.
in supporting the banks in the process of assisting the customers for the asset management, stock picking, and portfolio management. So this technology, these platforms can be quite efficient and effective at the same time in really putting together all the information about the risk-reward profile that every single client has with the guidelines and the strategic objectives of the bank. So the bank, of course, might have certain plans in order to push a certain asset class or certain products. At the same time, they have to couple this with, of course, the risk profile of the client and also all the regulatory issues from the different bodies that in every single country control the management of the individual savings. And with these platforms, you can have two different possible applications that I think are very interesting in terms of artificial intelligence. One is to support directly the client in doing so. So basically, the solution is a platform that interacts directly with a single customer in addressing his investing needs, or can be a sort of robot that assists the personal banker and therefore can be a link between the asset management teams within a bank with the personal banker teams. And in that case, I think it is very important also for the banks to really, I would say, cope with the clear challenge that is coming up with the fintechs, because of course the fintechs are there potentially as a competitors of the banks. And the bank, I think, should leverage exactly artificial intelligence in terms of reinforcing the relationship with the single client, which is the real asset that the bank has. So if the banks thinks about competing with fintechs or with the tech giants like Apple's or Facebook or Alibaba in China and so on, probably that kind of competition is quite difficult for a single bank, because the possibility for these giants to put money on the table and to have a huge amount of data on the single client or on the single markets is tremendous. What instead the bank can do is exactly work with their knowledge of the single client. Artificial intelligence can be quite a strong support for that.
Sorry, Jonathan. We were having a quick chat outside about the evolution of AI and how that integrates with bots and what are the challenges that are out there. I was complaining about how stupid Alexa is and all of her friends, Cortana, Siri, and others. And I'd love to, again, get your insight about why is it that, first of all, they're not that smart. I mean, I've had one for 2 years. I ask it to wake me up at 8. If I don't say 8 in the morning, it asks me. There are other questions, obviously, that are related and it doesn't understand. There's a lot of natural language processing issues that are out there. But really, why are they so stupid? And why aren't they getting smarter faster?
So part of the reason that they're so stupid is you need a massive amount of data. So basically what computers do is they take huge amounts of data and then they say, okay, pictures that look like this are probably a fish. Pictures that look like this are probably a dog. Pictures that look like this are probably a cat. In sound, it's, sounds like Alhamdulillah. Maybe what language is that? Maybe this is Arabic. Maybe this language is English. And maybe then this series of sounds actually means something else. But the human voice is insanely complex, and accents play huge different into it. And so it's very, very hard to essentially train computers enough so that they actually understand more than a handful of words at a time. Eventually, I think these things will get better and better and better. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the dream that I could talk to my computer was essentially science fiction. I can now ask Google directions, and 6 or 7 times out of 10, it'll come up with a decent direction for me to go in, and the 3 times I can yell at it because, Google's being stupid. But the nice thing about it is that I don't hurt Google's feelings. I can't hurt Siri's feelings. And I'm slowly teaching Siri, and all of us are slowly teaching Siri to make her smarter. This is going to take another 10 or 20 years before they're actually quite good.
10 or 20 years.
I can't be wrong that way. In 10 or 20 years, it's probably going to be quite a bit better. If it's sooner, then, well, I'm okay. If I tell you it's going to be better in 3 years, then I'm going to look stupid, don't I?
Can we talk about other applications for artificial intelligence? Can anyone give us examples of that? We spoke about bots.
Yep.
You just mentioned Google Maps. Any new innovations that are happening in a space that we should be watching out for?
So one of our portfolio companies is using the part of AI called facial recognition. So basically, they make a sink in a hospital or a soap dispenser in a hospital. It recognizes a nurse's face. And so you put it inside of an ICU room, and it can tell if your doctor or your nurse actually washed their hands before coming and treating the patient. It sounds kind of frightening, but if you could just do that in the United States alone, you could probably save 100,000 lives per year. Just by making sure that people wash their hands when they come into the room. Nurses and doctors try really hard, but it's also really easy to forget something like that when a patient is dying or when, I don't know, someone's screaming outside. That is a really interesting use case. Another interesting use case is making cars just more aware and smarter about what's around them. Self-driving cars, I think, are a really interesting use case of AI, which there's going to be a lot of truck drivers in 10 years out of jobs.
Again, 10 years. That's a good disclaimer. Back into the context of banks and still staying within the context of AI, there's lots of applications for that, right? Loyalty, recommendations, other things. Are you guys working with anything like that? Are there good examples that you guys can mention? Maybe Massimo, I know you work with some companies that do that.
Yes, you mentioned another area which is very interesting is about the loyalty programs, where basically these programs are coupled with advanced CRM solutions. And again, big data coupled with artificial intelligence can be quite useful in directly, at best, the program and the campaign to the single user, to the single customer. And that is something that is, again, developing significantly in certain countries, Italy, but also, as far as we know, France and Germany, for instance, are quite active on these plans. And another thing is coupling artificial intelligence with IoT, for instance, with insurance. So in particular for personal health programs and the coverage. So the insurance companies can much better tailor the coverage and therefore the pricing to the specific needs of the single customer based on a detailed monitoring information on his health status and his practices, the way that he behaves on a daily basis. So that again is an area that is picking up significantly. Yeah.
I see some scared faces in the audience after what you mentioned. Let's a show of hands. How many people are afraid of the invasion of privacy that's triggered by artificial intelligence? That's a lot of people. Two of my panelists. Sorry, didn't notice that one. Are there things that can be done? I mean, again, we also joked about this outside, right? 10 years ago, Target figured out that a 16-year-old was pregnant. Today, maybe Google can send you an ambulance and tell you you're just about to give birth.
Yep.
Are there ways by which we can kind of like, take a step back, lock down our privacy, or is this time for us to just simply accept the fact that this is it, it's good for us-ish, and, this is a new standard?
So my wife yelled at me when I bought an Amazon Alexa.
Okay.
She's like, I will not have a microphone on in my house 24/7.
Okay.
I haven't used Facebook for years. I try not to use Google. And just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean that the NSA doesn't have a file on me. And so as a consumer, I'm very, very cautious in terms of privacy. As an investor, I understand the immense value that can be mined from all this data. But I'm very, very, very concerned that we need to talk more about how much data are we giving to multinational corporations, frankly, who are primarily in the United States. And I've actually had some friends in emerging markets say, is this a new form of digital colonialism? It's a good argument. And I think that in emerging markets, we need to kind of evaluate what kind of data we're actually letting these corporations in the United States give to us. But I'm a strange guy from the United States. You won't hear a whole lot of people talking about that.
Any other comments about privacy, about best practices, or or ways by which you can help people understand or react with these trackable AI bots, things that are out there?
I think you need to embrace it.
You need to embrace it. I mean, I have an Alexa in every room. I genuinely don't care. If the NSA is happy to listen, I have nothing to hide.
Just let them enjoy.
Be an open book, yes?
Exactly.
Let them enjoy. I think we have time for like 1 or 1.5 questions from the audience, if you guys have any. Great, we have one from the first row. How much time do we have left, by the way? Excellent. Hi. Could you introduce yourself? When the microphone works. I think it's... There you go.
Okay. I'm
Hi.
Naila Salibi. I'm a journalist, IT journalist from Radio Monte Carlo, Paris. Well, you're talking about artificial intelligence and how about privacy, but you talk how dummy is Siri, Cortana, and else. When it will be at the point of disruption, and the artificial intelligence will be on her own.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The point of what?
Sorry.
You know the point of disruption.
The point of?
Disruption.
Disruption.
Yes.
Okay, are we talking about
When
singularity here?
About artificial intelligence, yes. It's not a sci-fi, it's maybe in 20 years, maybe less. And the artificial intelligence will be on her own.
I think she's referencing the concept of singularity, or when.
Yes, that's it.
When is the
Singularity,
computer
yes.
going to take over? I am a contrarian when it comes to that.
Just when it comes to that?
What's that?
You're contrarian when it comes to a couple of things.
Imagine. I actually believe that there is a thing called a soul. I have a hard time as a computer programmer thinking that I will be able to program a computer so that it will have a soul. I think computers will be very, very, very good at making decisions and recognizing certain things. I think that actually, can we teach a computer to love? Can we teach a computer to hope? As a programmer, I would hate to imagine what that algorithm would look like. And I actually believe that the human is actually more than just a collection of electrons and molecules together, that there is actually something inside of us that is other, that is spirit. So do I think that an AI is going to take over the world?
Oh, no,
No.
This is not the question.
But I think it makes for really good reading.
I think she's asking it's more a matter of a when, not if.
No, not taking the control of the humanity, but it's in the same time, humanity give the big data with deep learning to artificial intelligence. And this is a problem because the artificial intelligence will be like a human brain and have a human thinking maybe. Hate, war, or something like that.
I don't like the term artificial intelligence. I like the term machine learning. Because I think artificial intelligence communicates what we see in the movies.
Yeah.
Machine learning communicates that a car can learn what the roads are like. A camera can look what a human face or what a dog looks like. We can make better decisions. An algorithm can decide how to build a better financial portfolio much quicker and with less cost than a human being can. I think those are the types of decisions that machine learning will get very, very good at. A true artificial intelligence that we would describe it, maybe in 20 years, but I don't think so.
That's it. Maybe another question about Facebook bots and when they thought they gave birth between about a new languages, what it was?
Facebook
Bots.
gave birth to
What's the question?
New language between bots.
a new language between bots.
And they stopped the program. Oh, guys, you know that. It's 20 years ago.
So you can actually teach a computer to communicate with other computers.
Yeah.
And you can program an evolutionary model so that if this, you can teach a computer model to walk by moving, and if it moved better than the last generation, it will continue to move better, and it continue generation by generation to improve. That's called evolutionary algorithms.
Yeah.
If you put two computers in a room and you say, just try to talk to each other, eventually they will find a way with a genetic algorithm to actually share data to each other. If you actually remember when Microsoft tried to create an AI chatbot, a Twitter bot,
That's it.
within 24 hours,
They shut
it was
down.
spouting Nazi propaganda.
Exactly.
So I would rather have those types of AIs shut off.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any last question? Yes.
So about privacy, I would like you to ask the same questions about who would care of giving information if he had a 50% bonus on his car, provided that we install a small kit in his car of his way of driving, and he'll get a monthly bonus, and see how many would reply. So and that's a practical question because
I think Massimo agrees with you.
Direct Assurance had that business development. Joy Car, even in Chile, had that. So it's a question of leaving the option to the customer and giving him a bonus when he decides. So it's just a comment.
Thank you. Okay, we had one last question from the gentleman here, and before we wrap up our panel. Second row.
Hi guys.
Hello.
My name is Michael. I'm a founder of a travel tech startup. My question here today is that we've been recently all into the hype of blockchain and AI, but we forgot that it's a mean to an end, and we all figured out that blockchain need actually, in every 1 second, only 9 transactions can happen. But today there is artificial intuition and there is hashgraph, and nobody is tackling these means that can lead to more revolutionary ways to deal with stuff, except of just having AI and blockchain to deal with our problem. But today we have artificial intuition and hashgraph, and we're not hearing about it. And maybe I don't know if someone actually knows about it here. So why are we still in a blockchain where it needs 9 transactions per 1 second, where hashgraph can create 300,000 transactions per second?
So just a correction, it's not the blockchain that can do this. This is something that's specific to Bitcoin. Right? If my panelists
It's-
can correct me
yeah,
as well.
correct.
And it's 7 transactions per second, not 9.
It's not.
So that's one. Your question is?
My question is, why are we still using blockchain?
And not hashtags?
Hashgraph. Hashgraph is an algorithm that have been created, launched in TechCrunch in December, that reached consensus using virtual voting and gossip protocol instead of just building blocks after blocks.
Do we need to brush up on our reading, I guess?
So why are we using specific algorithm to actually scale the transactions and the hash rate as opposed to other blockchains that have different, more efficient? I think scaling blockchain is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar business in 10 or 20 years. And when you have $1 trillion resting on a solution of a problem, someone's probably going to find an answer to that. At very least, if someone can release something that makes blockchain like the Lightning Network, if they make that scale to 50 or 100,000 transactions per second, my guess is whoever solves that algorithm will become a billionaire. So there's going to be a lot of money pouring into this, and I think having a wide variety of different blockchains where a lot of people are working on different solutions is actually a good process for us. Eventually, the winners will win.
Thank you.
Okay, this concludes our panel for today. Thanks a lot for my panelists. I think we, again, could have probably spent another 40 minutes discussing, the new techs. Some keywords that were mentioned, mostly by Jonathan, who's been coining terms all this panel: Internet of Money, evolutionary algorithms, crypto assets. I have one more somewhere. Oh no, that has to do with souls and things. So, just as a quick recap, I think we quickly discovered that investing in one particular kind of cryptocurrency is not good enough. Machine learning and artificial intelligence needs anywhere from 10 to 20 years. So does self-driving cars, complete machine control, and lots of other things. I'd like to thank my panelists again, Jonathan Nelson, Massimo Cambolo, and Ramil Kamri, for joining us. Can you have a round of applause for them, please? Thank you.